Hello students, hope you all are fine, reading well at home and completing your homeworks in time. Today we are going to learn about resources and development from geography. But before starting the class, as usual, I want you to get ready with a pen and a notebook to note down the important points while we are going through this important chapter. So get ready soon, children. So resources and development. So can you identify and name the various items used in making your life comfortable, especially in your villages and towns? List the items and name the materials used in their making. You will be surprised to know that everything available in our environment which can be used to satisfy our needs, provided it is technologically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable, can be termed as a resource. So that is the definition of a resource. So everything available in our environment which can be used to satisfy our needs, provided it is technologically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable, can be termed as a resource. So that is the definition of a resource. Classification of resources. How are resources classified? We are going to see now. So classification of resources, they are basically classified into natural and human resources. Under natural resources we have renewable and non-renewable resources. Human resources are divided into structures and institutions, quantity and quality. Natural resources are further divided into renewable and non-renewable resources. When we come to renewable resources, they are divided as continuous or flow, for example wind, water, etc. and biological resources. See, the biological resources are further divided into natural vegetation like forests and again into wildlife. Non-renewable resources are divided into recyclable resources, for example metals, non-recyclable resources like fossil fuels. So this is a small flow chart about the classification of resources. We are going to read in detail now. Okay. So interdependent relation between nature, technology and institutions. So physical environment consists of nature. We have various institutions also and technology. So human beings interact with nature through technology and create institutions to accelerate their economic development. So this clearly shows the interdependent relation between nature, technology and institutions. Types of resources. So there are various types of resources. Same, the classification what you have seen there, it has been in a different kind of table which you can easily remember. Based on origin we can categorize as biotic or abiotic. Based on utility, renewable and non-renewable resources. Based upon level of development we can classify as potential or actual resources. Based on distribution, localized or okay, you can see that clearly. Based on ownership, individual, national, community or international resources. On the basis of origin, we can classify resources as biotic resources. This is very important from examination point of view again children, because they ask to define 1 or 2 kinds of resources and explain about them too. Sometimes it may be a 1 mark or 3 mark or a 5 marks question. So you should be very sure about writing what you are attempting in the examination hall. So please pay attention now. So biotic resources, these are obtained from biosphere and have life such as human beings, flora and fauna, fisheries and livestock. Otherwise, all the living organisms on the earth and the flora, I mean to say the vegetation and fauna means the animal life, are called biotic resources. Human beings are biotic resources. Okay. Next comes abiotic resources. All those things which are composed of non-living things are called abiotic resources. For example, rocks and metals. All non-living substances used by human beings such as soil, air and sunlight are classified as abiotic resources. You can see the pictures also. Clear? On the basis of exhaustibility, renewable resources. What are these? Let us see. The resources which can be renewed or reproduced by physical, chemical or mechanical processes. I repeat, the resources which can be renewed or reproduced by physical, chemical or mechanical processes are known as renewable or replenishable resources. So other name of renewable resource is replenishable resources. For example, solar and wind power or wind energy, water, forests and wildlife. The renewable resources may further be classified into different forms. Okay. So what are non-renewable resources? These occur over a very long geological time. Minerals and fossil fuels are examples of such resources. These resources take millions of years in their formation. Some of the resources like metals are recyclable and some like fossil fuels cannot be recyclable or recycled and get exhausted with their use. So this is on the basis of exhaustibility. Those are renewable resources and non-renewable resources. On the basis of status of development. On the basis of status of development. Potential resources, developed resources, stocks and reserves. We are going to see one by one now. Okay. Potential resources. Resources which are found in a region but have not been utilized. So resources which are found in a region but are not been utilized because of one or the other reason. For example, the western parts of India, particularly Rajasthan and Gujarat, which have enormous potential for development of wind and solar energy, but so far these have not been developed properly. The reasons can be many, but potential resources are resources which are found in a region which have not been utilized. I gave the examples also. So what are developed resources now? So developed resources are resources which are surveyed and their quality and quantity have been determined for utilization. I mean, a survey was conducted and it was found that they can be utilized. The development of resources depends on technology and level of their feasibility. So developed resources which are surveyed and their quality and quantity have been determined for utilization. Next comes stock. Materials in the environment which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but human beings do not have the appropriate technology to access these, are included among stock. For example, water is a compound of two inflammable gases, hydrogen and oxygen, which can be used as a rich source of energy, but we do not have the required technical know-how to use them for this purpose. Hence, it can be considered as stock. Reserves. Reserves are the subset of the stock which can be put into use with the help of existing technical know-how, but their use has not been started. These can be used for meeting future requirements. For example, river water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being used or utilized only to a limited extent. Thus, the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. So, this is about the resources classified on the basis of the status of development. On the basis of distribution, ubiquitous resources, the resources that can be found everywhere, for example air, light, water, etc. are termed as ubiquitous resources. Clear? Next, localized resources. Localized resources are those that can be found only in certain parts of the world. For example, copper and iron ore, thermal power plants, etc. These are found only in some parts of the world, or these are localized resources. These are called as localized resources. On the basis of ownership, how are they classified? We are going to see now. They are classified on the basis of ownership. Individual resources, the resources which are owned privately by individuals. Example, the mobile phones, the lands which we own, these are called as individual resources. Let us take an example to understand this further. Many farmers own land which is allotted to them by government against the payment of revenue. In villages, there are people with land ownership, but there are many who are landless. Urban people who own plots, houses and other property. Plantation, pasture lands, ponds, water and well, etc. are some examples of resources owned by individuals. Okay, these are individual resources. Community owned resources. These are the resources which are accessible to all the members of a community. Village commons like grazing grounds, burial grounds, village ponds, etc., public parks, picnic spots. These are some of the examples of what we call, yes, you are right, community owned resources like playgrounds. In urban areas, these are de facto accessible to all the people living there. So, what are national resources then? Technically, all the resources belong to the nation. The country has a legal pass to acquire even private property for public good. You might have seen roads, canals, railways being constructed on fields owned by some individuals. Urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. All the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, these all are included under this particular national resources. So, next comes what is international resource. We are going to see what are international resources now. So, what are international resources? These are international institutions, or there are international institutions which regulate some resources. The oceanic resources beyond 200 kilometers of exclusive economic zone belong to the open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the concurrence of international institutions. So, the resources belonging to international institutions, for example, oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the EEZ, okay, exclusive economic zone. So, do you know that India has got the right to mine manganese nodules from the bed of Indian Ocean, from that area which lies beyond the exclusive economic zone? Development of resources. exploitation, unequal distribution, ecological problems are there always. Okay, so scarcity of resources and depletion. So resources are vital for human survival as well as for maintaining the quality of life. It was believed that resources are free gifts of nature. As a result, human beings used them indiscriminately, and this has led to the following major problems. So these are some of the problems which we are facing because of indiscriminate use of resources. Depletion of resources for satisfying the greed of few individuals. Accumulation of resources in few hands, which in turn divide the society into two segments, that is haves and have-nots, or rich and the poor. Indiscriminate exploitation of resources has led to global ecological crises such as global warming, ozone layer depletion, environmental pollution and land degradation. So an equitable distribution of resources has become essential for a sustained quality of life and global peace. If the present trend of resource depletion by a few individuals and countries continues, the future of our planet is in great danger. Therefore, resource planning is essential for sustainable existence of all forms of life. Sustainable existence is a component of sustainable development. So what is sustainable development? The economic development which does not damage the environment and at the same time takes care of the needs of the future generations is called sustainable development. Again, important from examination point of view, children, what is sustainable development? The economic development which does not damage the environment and at the same time takes care of the needs of the future generations is called sustainable development. So that's what sustainable development means. So a summit was conducted in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. What happened over here? We are going to see now. So in June 1992, more than 100 heads of states met in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil for the first International Earth Summit. The summit was convened for addressing urgent problems of environmental protection and socio-economic development at the global level. The assembled leaders signed the Declaration on Global Climatic Change and Biological Diversity. The Rio Convention endorsed the Global Forest Principles and adopted Agenda 21 for achieving sustainable development in the 21st century. So what was Agenda 21? We are going to see now. So it is a declaration signed by world leaders in 1992 at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which took place at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It aims at achieving global sustainable development. It is an agenda to combat environmental damage, poverty, disease through global cooperation on common interests, mutual needs and shared responsibilities. One major objective of the Agenda 21 is that every local government should draw its own local Agenda 21. So resource planning in India. So planning is a widely accepted strategy for judicious use of resources. It has importance in a country like India, which has enormous diversity in the availability of resources. There are regions which are rich in certain types of resources but are deficient in some other resources. There are some regions which can be considered self-sufficient in terms of availability of resources, and there are some regions which have acute shortage of some vital resources. If you will be clear with this example, children. So for example, the states of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh are rich in minerals and coal deposits. Arunachal Pradesh has abundance of water resources but lacks in infrastructural development. The state of Rajasthan is very well endowed with solar and wind energy but lacks in water resources. The cold desert of Ladakh is relatively isolated from the rest of the country. It has very rich cultural heritage, but it is deficient in water, infrastructure and some vital minerals. This calls for balanced resource planning at national, state, regional and local levels. So, resource planning in India. Okay, it is a complex process which involves, there are some steps, 3 steps over here. Identifying inventory of resources across the regions of the country. How is this done? This involves surveying, mapping and qualitative and quantitative estimation and measurement of the resources. The second step involves evolving a planning structure endowed with appropriate technology, skill and institutional setup for implementing resource development plans. The third step is matching the resource development plans with overall national development. So, these are the 3 steps which are involved in resource planning in India. So, India has made concentrated efforts for achieving the goals of resource planning right from the first 5-year plan launched after independence. So, the availability of resources is a necessary condition for the development of any region, but just mere availability of resources in the absence of corresponding changes in technology and institutions may hinder development. There are many regions in our country that are rich in resources, but these are included in economically backward regions. On the contrary, there are some regions which have a poor resource base but are economically developed. So, resource conservation. What is resource conservation? Planned use of resources in order to meet the present needs and to store a part of the future generations is always called resource conservation. So, resources are vital for the development activity, but irrational consumption and overutilization of resources may lead to socio-economic and environmental problems. To overcome these problems, resource conservation at various levels is very important. This has been the main concern of the leaders and thinkers in the past. For example, Gandhiji was very apt in voicing his concern about resource conservation in his verse. What did he say? Let us see. He said, "There is enough for everybody's need and not for anybody's greed." He placed the greedy and selfish individuals and exploitative nature of modern technology as the root cause for resource depletion at the global level. He was against the mass production and wanted to replace it with the production by the masses. So that's what Mahatma Gandhi meant. So with this we come to this part of this particular chapter, resource and development, children. So we have some home assignment for you. Do read the lesson thoroughly at home and complete your homeworks in time. Thank you, children.